Not anymore. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. So over to you. Let's start with Hafiz.
Avatar, Meher Baba ki Jai. Three of Meher Baba's favorite couplets of Hafiz, a mystical Persian poet. Befitting a fortunate slave, carry out every command of the master without any question of why and what. About what you hear from the master, never say it is wrong because, my dear, the fault lies in your own incapacity to understand him. I am slave of the master who has released me from ignorance. Whatever my master does is of the highest benefit to all concerned. Hafiz, Avatar Meher Baba Kije. Over to you, Karthik.
Jai Baba, thank you. So I did refresh that calendar, so you might see it pop up for those of you who want it that way. But I think most people seem to like the WhatsApp um, reminder and the Telegram
Mhm.
reminder. I don't know if you've seen that. That also
Yeah,
pops.
Yeah,
that
That's
does.
ma-
But
we've seen both on WhatsApp and Telegram.
no, but it's manual and hence inefficient. So I don't know.
yeah,
Some days I forget. Some days I do it. 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever. So in that sense, it's inefficient. So the calendar should fix that anyway.
what better? Yeah. Mm.
Yes.
Thank you.
So uh, okay. So we are back to Avatar. Any thoughts or inputs before we can start reading today? No, Kama is in Tiruvannamalai. For those of you interested, I think we need the app tracking for Kama. So I was exchanging
Hey,
texts.
Kama keeps moving. Every week he's in a new place. My God. He was
Tiruvannamalai,
in what? Gangtok
Yeah, he is
last week.
yes,
2,000 kilometers away from where he was last.
correct.
That's it.
I think he's challenging Baba's record, 75,000 miles.
I know. Yeah, actually, he might very well challenge that, but because he has the advantage of jet travel.
And the trains and the jets and whatever
Yeah, I mean,
convenience of modern
the,
times.
exactly. The jet will give him the super edge. Uh,
Yeah,
the rest, I think, sadly, we have not done very well on speed in India.
in India yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we were reading about the Manzile meme days, Bombay stay of Baba, and the early Mandali around him. So we stopped on page 87 on the physical book. It was 72. So let's continue from that point on. And uh, if if anyone wants to read, you can read. Otherwise, I will read for some time. Let me get started, as I think there's connectivity issues. There's Ashok and Mamaji jumping in and out. Let me start. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. For a moment, so this is, let me continue with some context. Yeah, let me read from the previous page so that we have some continuity. In the close relationship that existed between disciples and master, Baba never lost an opportunity to drive home a valuable lesson. One evening, as they were playing a new game of marbles in the compound, under specially provided electric lights, another of Baba's soul testing dramas was staged. Ramju, a married disciple, had been rather concerned about the health of his only son, who had been ill for some time. He was also troubled about his wife, who was pregnant. On this evening, he arrived at the ashram visibly worried because he had not heard from them. He went out to the compound where all the disciples were absorbed in the new game. Baba, as usual, was in a happy mood until Ramju arrived. Instead of the cheerful word with which he always greeted every member of the ashram family, He gave Ramju a grave look. Then he turned to another disciple and asked, "Shall we tell him now?" Replying in an equally serious tone, the disciple suggested that it would be more considerate to give Ramju the news after dinner. A few minutes later, Baba said, "I think it better we tell him about the telegram now." Then he told Ramju bluntly that his son had passed away. Scarcely before Ramju could react to this sudden shock, Baba ordered him to join the others in their game. For a moment, he was too dazed to move, but quickly collecting himself, he obeyed Baba's command. In speaking of this experience, Ramju says that the electric lights were swimming before his eyes and the players appeared like shadows in a horrible nightmare as he mechanically joined in the sport. As soon as Ramju had, without hesitation, fulfilled the command, Baba called him back and handed him the telegram. The message read that Ramju had another son and that all was well with his family. Thus, does the master train all his disciples to rise above personal pain or sorrow that they may eventually realize the unconditioned life of God. Few, particularly in the West, are able to understand this aspect of the God man. Having achieved the ultimate in physical comfort and ease, the average religious Westerner projects upon God his own image of the indulgent father who satisfies all the desires of his children. This is particularly true of those whose religious background has inculcated in them the belief that God never inflicts pain. To them, kindness is synonymous with softness and indulgence. Herein they reveal their lack of spiritual maturity. The larger kindness of freeing the soul from bondage to pleasure or repugnance to pain is imperfectly comprehended by them. In spite of the iron discipline which Baba exercised, freedom of speech and opinion were encouraged by him. The group had its own governing body called the Gutta. Is it Gutta or Gatta? Gatta wine shop, which corresponds to our Western cafe. The Gutta assembled periodically after dinner when everyone expressed his viewpoint freely on the subjects under consideration. To
Jay Baba,
prevent, yeah,
Karthik, it is in common parlance, I think it is Gatta.
Gatta, okay. It's
Okay,
a
can
Marathi.
yeah. It's Hindi, Marathi. It's just a sort of a slang, but it's okay. Can we go back to the previous paragraph? Because in the Sanskaras chapter, we had read that we need to have all sorts of sanskaras, I mean, all sorts of experiences as well, good and the bad, and pain and pleasure. So, and the sum total should come to zero, is what I remember. Could is it correlated to what we said in the last paragraph, or can we?
Yeah, the second part of the last paragraph kind of suggests that. But the bigger point that's being made by Jean here is the fact that the master, the God man in this case, is going to expose you to pleasure and pain, and he's not going to hesitate. Whereas she says the Western mind, given the creature comforts that they enjoy and the relative comforts that they have compared to the occidental, they have compared to the oriental, they have basically a feeling that everyone should be pampered and taken care of positively, happily, etc., etc. Whereas Baba gives you both, and that's something that you need to get you that the Western mind takes some time to get used to. Whereas I think that's a good point in the sense that on the eastern side, we always know that masters can expose us to what can be classified as challenges, as hardships that are put to make you a better person, which is a very, very unusual concept if you go to the West. Even punishments are frowned upon in school and college. And,
Yeah,
yeah, so that's the point she's making.
it's sort of the frame of mind between the East and the West.
Yeah, the approach and
Approach.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
So, back to Gutta. Gatta. I forgot which way was it supposed to be?
Both ways are okay.
Okay, Gatta to Gutta. To prevent the Gatta from becoming as noisy as the places after which it was named, they made it a strict rule that only one person could speak at a time and only after obtaining permission of the chair. All earnings of ashram members went into a common fund. All shared alike in its benefits. No individual owned anything for himself. Though each one was encouraged by Baba to develop his own special qualities, all were bound in brotherhood by their love for the Master, of whom many of them had heard Upasani Maharaj's advice. Follow Merwan, do as he says. The time will come when all the world will follow his lead. One of the disciples was subjected to especially severe treatment. In his strange symbolic way of helping to rid him of his binding karma, Baba would time and again throw the disciple's bedding out of the window and order him to clear out, reiterating that he did not want him around. Fortunately for the disciple, he let his intuition rather than his intellect or emotions govern his reaction. He held fast and is now among those closest to the Master. As the months progressed at the ashram, Baba was drawing his spiritual net tighter around the disciples. Less and less did he give consideration to their whims and preferences. More and more did he require them to give in to each other, to relinquish a prized viewpoint or habit. In spite of the strict regulations and the severe tests and trials, however, the disciples look back upon their life at Manzil-e-Meem with fond and wistful memories. Talking of the previous paragraph, anyone knows which Mandali member is being referred to? The one whose bedding was being thrown out over and over again? Because he says one of the closest, so I don't know. Anyway, if we find out, we should share. During this period, Baba went on prolonged fasts of water, milk, or lemon juice with no impairment of his energy and directive power. Occasionally, he would manifest sudden acute illness, during which his body would be racked with pain. Then, just as suddenly, the illness would vanish. He told his group that he had to undergo these periodical agonies for the benefit of the group, that eventually he would have to suffer and die for each one of them, as he took upon himself the responsibility for their individual liberation. Heaven and hell. To most of us, especially in the Western world, the thought of giving up the direction of our lives to another is quite unpalatable. Unless we have been brought up in the Catholic tradition or have read lives of Western monastic saints, we do not know the great benefits to be derived from the discipline of obedience. Our egos insist that such a course is childish, unworthy of mature human beings. We have been taught and firmly believe that we can find our way to heaven, and so we can. By our own unaided exertions, we can create either heaven or hell for ourselves. But both are limitations and therefore handicap the individual soul's unfoldment. Heaven is the byproduct of striving to do good, while hell is the logical result of unbridled evil. Spiritual liberation, which the Master helps the disciple to achieve, is, however, beyond the duality of good and evil, heaven and hell. Before the perfect balance is struck, the debit and credit entries in the soul's ledger must absolutely cancel each other, not in sum total of entries, but in the comparative quality of good and bad soul impressions. No man, however highly destined, can achieve this balance without the intervention of a master, though an intense spirit may go far toward the goal. How indispensable is the aid of a master, how essential the oneness between disciple and his destined master, how all-inclusive the responsibility of the master in the regeneration of his chosen disciple, is strikingly illustrated by the experience of Baba's second master, Upasni Maharaj. When Maharaj became the disciple of his own master, Sai Baba, he received from him the following instructions in preparation of his 4 years novitiate. You are not to worry about a single thing. I am fully conscious of your worth. For many years have I followed your trail. Whatever good or bad deeds you have performed during these years have in truth been enacted by me. You were not conscious of me, but I was fully aware of you. For years I have been thinking of you in my heart. Now you are at home. There is nowhere else for you to go. If you are unable to do anything, do not do anything. Then, in language symbolical of the supreme service which he was destined to render, Upasni Maharaj, in uniting him with God, Sai Baba said, I will myself purchase the ticket for you and will, with my own hands, seat you in the train. And without allowing the train to stop anywhere, I will take you straight to your ultimate destination. In other words,
in the last paragraph, the last line, can you just brood, or can you just can somebody explain that? If you're unable to do anything, don't do anything. What does that mean?
yeah, I also was
Basically, it
wondering.
means don't worry. You may be trying something, but don't worry about them because I am with you. I am going to take you straight to the final destination. So I think it is like giving a comfort to a soul,
Or
Uh,
that's
like that.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
tagline.
Try. Yeah.
So
Try doing whatever I want you to do. But if you're not able to do, don't worry. That's
thanks.
what it
It's that like tagline. Don't worry, be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think the best part was the train example, which I think
very
consciously,
nice.
if we get that question in our mind, why Baba? Because there are so many ways, you have so many ways to, there is isms and sects and they all preach right things. I mean, it's not just Baba, as we discussed many times. And but with Baba, that's the added advantage. Yeah, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. I continue. In other words, he would not permit his disciple to be sidetracked or lost on any of the cosmic planes, but would guide him directly to the summit of consciousness. When Upasni Maharaj finally achieved realization through the loving guidance of his master, Sai Baba explained, I have given Maharaj everything. Whatever he is mine. There is no spiritual difference between him and me. Mine alone has been the responsibility for the perfection which is his today. Spiritual pilgrimage. During the Bombay period, Baba made a number of short trips with his disciples to nearby places of pilgrimage. Among these was a journey to the tomb of Mohammedan Sadguru Haji Malang Shah. To reach the tomb, which stood on a high hill, was a strenuous ordeal. Upon their return, the disciples were exhausted and parched, but Baba forbade them to quench their thirst before they reached the railroad station, another 14 hot, dusty miles. Such apparently arbitrary measures can be understood only if one realizes that every single outer action of Baba's is fraught with inner significance, and such a pilgrimage to the tomb of a perfect master no doubt had deep bearing upon the spiritual unfoldment of those involved. To quench one's physical thirst before the journey was completed would, according to the master's wise judgment, manifest in a corresponding spiritual hindrance and delay in reaching the ultimate goal of liberation. The severe ruling, as so many of Baba's, could have served a double purpose. On purely rational grounds, the value of such discipline is apparent. To learn to wait, to deny ourselves the satisfaction of the moment, unquestionably helps to eradicate weakness, makes the for strength of character. Perhaps the master of man has resolved this time to train a group of disciples who will not so readily fall asleep in the Gethsemane mains of the world. Now, what's Gethsemanes of the world? So this is getting to similar territory to
Haji Mastan is in Mumbai, near Kalyan.
Okay, so not far.
Yeah.
So it's a biblical kind of term, is it? It's a Mount of Olives, where Jesus said to have prayed on the night of his arrest before crucifixion. So let's read that again. Perhaps the master of man has resolved this time to train a group of disciples who will not so readily fall asleep. Oh, okay. So maybe the night prior to crucifixion, the Mandali, Jesus's Mandali, basically fell asleep for whatever reason, and Baba as Christ was disappointed. I think. I mean, anybody with more clarity can propose. Okay. You want to rotate the reading? Anybody's in a position to start reading now from Ashram at Ahmednagar?
I can read here.
Jai Baba, please.
Jai Baba. Ashram at Ahmednagar. On the last day of March 1923, Baba told his men that the ashram in Bombay would be disbanded, although 2 months' tenancy was still due on the lease of the house. The matter of lease is of little importance to Baba when his work required him to make a change. However troublesome it may be for those who have to adjust the matter, not for him are the limitations of time-worn routine. Change is always the order of the day with Baba. No one who has been with him for any length of time expects plans to work out according to mind-made timetables. Yet when outer circumstances coincide with Baba's inner work, every detail works out with clock-like precision. For though the greater part of his being functions in a sphere which knows no time, on this material plane, Baba manifests a split-second time sense. I repeat this. Yet, when the outer circumstances coincide with Baba's inner work, every detail works out with clock-like precision. For though the greater part of his being functions in a sphere which knows no time, on this material plane, Baba manifests a split-second time sense. If he gives orders to leave at 5 minutes past midnight on a journey, he will, without fail, be found ready to start at precisely that moment. This not merely out of arbitrary punctiliousness, not sure I'm reading that correctly, punctiliousness, but because Baba's timing has always a deeper significance on behalf of his disciples or in connection with his universal work than may appear on the surface. For that reason, he will not tolerate tardiness on their part. Ahmednagar was to be the headquarters of the next Baba retreat. He took with him only a few of his disciples. The others were temporarily sent back to their homes. With this smaller group of followers, Baba made a number of short journeys before finally settling at Ahmednagar. At Arangao, about 5 miles from Ahmednagar, where a Hindu saint, Buaji Bua, is said to have buried himself alive, Baba decided to stay and asked his men to clear away the debris around dilapidated, uninhabited post office building. They began the work at once, but after remaining there for only 4 days, Baba decided to return to Ahmednagar. Do we know where is Buaji Bua's? Where did he bury himself? Is it around somewhere around Samadhi or Lower MPR or anybody?
Actually, it's not on the pilgrim map. Let's see if Google Maps points it out.
Hmm.
So if it's Arangaon, it has to be on the
Yeah, Arangaon is not so big, right?
What was that? Buaji Bua, right? There's
yeah.
a temple. Inside Arangaon, there is a temple. The very old temple. I think that is
Is it
what is meant here. Yeah, very old temple.
is it Buaji Bua temple?
I think it is. I saw it is written on the side. It is
Yeah,
Buaji
it's
Bua's
there.
temple.
Oh no, no,
Okay.
this is Sant Buaji Bale Tea and
Bua
Cold Drink.
temple, Arangaon, you have to write.
Yeah, Ahmednagar se Arangaon.
I remember going to a temple in near Arangaon, so I think it must be that. I'm vague
Old
memory.
temple, now with thick that
Yes.
that white जैसा बाबा का समाधि है, that kind of construction, right? Old temple.
Yes.
That is Buaji.
So there's a temple that's very small, but on the left as you approach the underpass
You-
for vehicles.
Wait,
Is
Karthik, go to the last thing here, walking tour. There's Buaji Bua.
That is a new construction. You don't see it from the road. On the left, you see a temple which is a Shiva temple, and a regular that
Okay, wait.
triangular
Hold
conical
it.
top. Behind that, there is one more which you don't see from here.
Karthik,
yeah, got it.
walking tour. Yeah, there's Buaji Bua temple mentioned there. You do a control F and look for Buaji
Yeah,
Bua.
here it is. Here it is.
Yeah, can you make it bigger?
World War One, such as the shrine. He sent me sent to enter the stone just outside the Vithoba temple. So
Toba temple.
maybe you guys are talking about the Vithoba temple, and maybe the tomb or the shrine is just outside.
Where is Vitova temple?
That we
In
can try.
Arangaon. Vittal temple in Arangaon. Vittal is Vitova?
Is that the case? I don't know.
I think
Sanjay
so.
might know.
Karthik, just leave it. Actually, we get lost. I mean, we get digressed from the message that she wanted to convey. I mean, these are all
Not
The
of significance. Okay.
not material.
Distractions.
Yes.
Good training from Baba. Come back. Don't get lost.
Yes.
Sanjay ji, Baba spoke through you. Huh? Good one.
yeah, we missed the message that she wanted to write.
Yeah. Okay. Baba decided to stay and asked his men to clear away the debris around a dilapidated, uninhabited post office building. They began to work at once, but remaining there only 4 days, Baba decided to return to Ahmednagar. Those who have experience with Baba, this life of constant change, gradually realize that something in their inner consciousness is loosening. They find themselves becoming detached from places, things, and even people. For examples of utter detachment, which is so essential for progress on spiritual path, Baba points to the greatest teachers of the world, Zoroaster, Buddha, Krishna, Muhammad, Jesus, whose watchword was renunciation. But Baba takes pains to convey to his disciples that renouncing must take place in the mind, in the innermost man. For in the mind, conscious and subconscious is found the root of all desire. Therefore, the mind must become the fakir, the renouncer. If man is to become free, when this freedom is finally attained, then no matter what outer life man may live, he remains detached under all circumstances. He then works not for self, but for the one, for the advancement of others, which is the true mission of the spiritually illuminated. No game for the weak. Baba was obviously weeding out his men, testing their stoutness of heart. Early in the stay at Ahmednagar, he gave them the choice of remaining with him, in which case he would demand implicit obedience, and he added their life would not be a soft one, or they could separate from him outwardly by living away from the ashram, yet still live according to a few rules of conduct which he would lay down for them. The third choice he gave them was to leave him permanently. No one wished to separate from Baba entirely. 13 chose to remain with him, and the others would return to their homes for a while, pledged to live according to his orders. The names of 13 were Behramji Irani, Gustadji Hansotia, Jal Irani, Baba's brother, Adi K. Irani, Aga Baido, uncle, Rustam, um, Baba Ubale, Ramju, Pendu, Padri, Slamson, a Hindu nicknamed by Baba Nervous, and a Mohammedan named Barsop. So one of them must be the guy whose bed was thrown out repeatedly.
Yes. Yeah, I was just thinking who among them would it be? But anyway, go ahead.
Doesn't matter. Baba never fails to emphasize that the pilgrimage of the spiritual aspirant is no undertaking for the weak, and his disciples seldom have to wait long for demonstration of this truth. The morning following the segregation of this group, long before the breakfast hour, Baba led the 13 on a journey. After walking a while towards Sarangao, he suddenly changed his course and told them that he would take them to some other undisclosed destination. They wondered about it, but asked no questions and continued on for a couple of hours until Baba halted at an inn that was reserved exclusively for the housing of lunatics and criminals. Here, Baba elected to stay with his men for a few days. On their return journey, they stopped off at Arangao for a brief stay. 11 days later, they found themselves back at Ahmednagar, only to prepare for a more extensive journey, which took them to Agra, where they visited Taj Mahal. From Agra, they proceeded to Mutra.
Mathura.
Mutra is where? Mathura or Mutra? Or Mathura must be.
Mathura,
Where
Mathura.
they,
Mathura.
where they bathed in the sacred river Jamna. Then they departed for Karachi by the way of Delhi. After a week at Karachi, they journeyed on to Quetta, the principal city of Balochistan. So you could just go all these places without passport those days. It was India, Balochistan, maybe not India, or it was maybe still India. Not
Yeah,
sure.
Balochistan was still India.
I see. Okay. So it was all within India at that time, right? I guess.
In fact, this whole passport regime was far more easier in most countries other than those big Western countries, because the travel was so few and far, right? So
Right,
yeah,
right.
I'm sure across Indian subcontinent you could just go without any document.
Mm-hmm. Instead of going on to Persia as they had originally planned, Baba decided to go to Calcutta by train and walk from there to Bombay. Walk from Calcutta to Bombay.
Wow.
Repeat again. Instead of going to Persia as they had originally planned, Baba decided to go to Calcutta by train and walk from there to Bombay, across the continent of India. During this pilgrimage, every member of the group wore robes of ascetic and ate but sparingly. Baba maintained a liquid diet throughout this entire period. During the long trek, Baba was in the lead, and like all others, he carried his bedding roll and traveling needs on his own shoulders. Throughout the grueling journey under the relentless sun of tropical India, all of the group under Baba's orders repeated incessantly in a low monotone the name of God that was revered by their respective religions. Whenever his men became exhausted, Baba relaxed the walking order. Immediately after a little rest, however, they would set on foot again averaging usually 25 to 30 miles a day. My goodness.
Yeah.
35 miles a day, that's 50 kilometers a day.
Yeah.
My
Quite a bit.
goodness. Nowadays, I'm trying to compare. The max I go is 22,000 steps, and my knees start hurting. I don't know about you guys. So
Yeah, that's
and
about.
yeah, I mean that I limit myself. So these guys are walking like 50 kilometers a day,
45 to 50, yeah. Insane.
and then across the country and continuously, right?
Wow.
Insane. When they arrived at Navsari, they were so disheveled and bearded that they were disheveled and bearded that they were mistaken for a gang of bandits, which the local police were hunting for carrying off little children. Baba Chakal, by the time they satisfied the authorities that they were victims of mistaken identity, there was considerable less ego in his men. Sometime after their return to Ahmednagar, a trip to Persia was discussed and planned. One of the disciples who had been sent to Bombay to obtain visas from Persian consul came back with strange story. The consul had told him that he could grant no visas unless all members of the party presented themselves at the consulate in person. Oh, of course, need not come, the consulate did, since he had already been at the consulate for a few days before and told him that he would send his passport for the consul's endorsement when they were ready for the journey. The disciple knew, however, that Baba had not been in or near Bombay in his physical body since their return to the ashram. Strange and inexplicable to the rational mind are the ways of the masters. Interesting.
So the suggestion is uh, he's made a visit to the consulate. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Journey into tribulation. Early in 1924, Baba and 8 of his disciples left for the first visit to Persia, the land of Baba's ancestors, the birthplace of God-man Zoroaster, upon whose precepts and teachings the great Zoroastrian religion was founded. Though the purpose of the journey was primarily connected with Baba's inner work, it also provided ample opportunity to stir the dormant propensities of the disciples. Not at least affliction which beset the party was a tropical fever which several members of the group contracted. Being with Baba does not necessarily ensure freedom from illness or pain. On the contrary, just as he quickens the positive side of our natures, inspiring us to deeper love, greater faith in God, so does he stir in equal measure the negative side with its shadow manifestation. Whatever negative characteristics we have repressed because they do not conform to our conscious ideal of ourselves are surely and swiftly brought to our attention to be faced and utilized in a constructive way. Under the tremendous impact of Baba's catalytic effect upon consciousness, the seeds in one's mind, be they seeds of so-called good or so-called evil, inevitably work their way into expression. Since Baba knows the conflict of the opposites must ultimately be overcome, he deliberately brings the warring elements out in the open so that the disciple may be compelled to find the way of transcendence. These good and bad tendencies called sanskaras are the binding effects of the past thoughts, emotions, and deeds. These karmic fetters which keep us in spiritual bondage, Baba undertakes to remove if we submit to his guidance and are accepted by him as disciples. From the moment of such surrender, the consciousness of the disciple is subject to whatever intensification of experience he needs in Baba's judgment for his cleansing and release. Baba denies nothing, he accepts everything. not as reality, but as a medium through which reality may manifest. Sin, if he ever used the word, he would define as reacting to the experience egocentrically, feeding the little self upon it, instead of viewing all expression of life with detachment. In this respect, the most spiritually evolved of modern depth psychologists are in accord with Baba's teaching. He is utterly detached and impersonal in the surgical application of his spiritual technique. At a time of deep inner ferment, I confessed to him the terrible hatred I felt for my companions. The hatred so intense that to murder them, I thought, would be sheer joy. I was profoundly disturbed by this dark, wild emotion and was therefore greatly astonished to see Baba smiling with apparent satisfaction, and still more amazed when he said, "Good, and have you felt lust yet?" Baba exclaimed, "Do I have to feel that too? In order to reach God, one has to experience everything," he calmly replied. It was then I began to understand that to achieve spiritual integration, the hidden tendencies and potencies of the collective unconscious have to be brought into consciousness, not to be used for personal satisfaction or self aggrandizement, but to be faced and accepted as part of one's evolutionary heritage and then raised to a higher dimension where the power of the collection image remains for constructive use while its poison is distilled. Interesting. On the long journey to Persia, Baba found many opportunities to teach his disciples unforgettable lessons in detachment from pleasure and pain. Nor was the return trip without repeated tests of endurance for them and unfailing self-immolation for Baba. The party, as usual, traveled in the lowest class, adjoining the section where they ate and slept. Carloads of fowl, cows, goats, donkeys, horses, crowed, moved, bleated, neighed, and attended freely to nature's demands. Prior to the mealtime, the gluttonous Arabs who were in charge of the animals killed the smaller ones and gorged themselves with almost raw meat. For a group of scrupulous vegetarians to whom the physical aspect of life was not of paramount importance, this oft repeated carnivorous orgy must have been rather trying. My goodness.
Okay, that brings the Persian trip to close. So, do you want to rotate reading?
Anybody else?
Yeah. Ashish, you've not been reading for a long time. If
Yeah,
you're
I
if you're
can.
in a position, you can read.
Yes.
Okay.
Fluid action. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, thank
On
you.
their, on their return to India, the usual change of plans took place. A superficial estimate of this characteristic of Baba might suggest a person of extreme indecision or one tossed about by whim and circumstance, and there has been one. Paul Brunton, who in recent years has written much about India and her teachings, who has so judged Baba. There is something to be said on the side of such critics. Baba is complete enigma to the intellectual or rational mind. But by such a criterion, he cannot be judged because he does not function on the intellectual plane, though in his capacity for organization, for attention to detail, for large scale direction and movement, all qualities we attribute to the balanced, rational mind, he has no peer. If Baba is what many of us know him to be, he functions on the plane of pure intuition, a sphere where things and events are as utterly fluid as time itself, where, in fact, time as we know it does not exist, where That seems to us the roundabout way to a goal is in the long run the shortest way. Anyone who has had experience in trying to live by response to inner guidance or intuition will know how circuitously spirit often seems to work and in ways fantastic to the rational mind, yet how miraculously it always achieves its objective. It is, I think, largely this seeming to be led in just the opposite direction to which one aims to go that makes the spiritual life such as absorbing and often such a droll adventure. This sudden moving from place to place, the unexpected startling changes in plans, startling changes in plans have deep inner significance not only for the people involved but also for Baba's all embarrassing inner work. Like all perfect masters, Baba always symbolizes a change or shift in the collective or individual consciousness by a parallel action or ritual on the physical plane. I recall that when we were with Baba in Cannes on the French Riviera in 1937, he allotted to each of us our particular rooms, which he said we were to occupy for the duration of 1 year's visit there. My husband and I unpacked our things and prepared to make our room homey for our long stay. When we were comfortably settled, after 24 hours, Baba announced that we were to move to another room in another building on the estate. Baba noticed that we were disturbed by this order, so he assured us that the move to our new quarters will be permanent. So again, we dug in for a long occupancy, but again we were moved. Three movings and settling within 4 days. The last time I was wholly unable to hide my annoyance. I had unpacked everything. We had rearranged the furniture according to our own needs and taste, and were at last, so we thought, settled. Baba assured me he was not crazy. The only sane one in the bunch, he declared and added, there's a reason for these moves. They mean something. I hope they did, though at the time I could see no valid reason for them. Years later, however, I was able to comprehend in a measure Baba's meaning and the obscure inner significance of what then seemed a fruitless ordeal. Even at the time, one quite pronounced result of this crisis was to show me that my personal comfort, my liking of order and harmonious and artistic environment were not of paramount importance. That attachment to such things was in fact a hindrance to the unfoldment of the spiritual life, that it was better to be fluid than comfortable. New ashram. 1 year after the disbanding of the ashram in Bombay, Baba called his disciples together once more and at Arangaon, near the town of Ahmednagar, established his new ashram, Mehrabad. Here, strict discipline was again imposed upon the disciples. From their rising hour at 5 until they retired 17 hours later, they were busy with gardening, building new quarters, or repairing old ones, except for the time assigned for devotional activities and meals. The hour between 6 and 7 in the morning was dedicated by each man to meditation or prayers according to his faith, of which there were many. Religiously and with respect to nationality, Baba's circle is distinctly universal, corresponding to Baba's own spiritual background. Within a year, small town had sprung up at Mehrabad, a school, a hospital, and dispensary, an ashram for lepers and the destitute. Baba placed Dr. Karkal in charge of hospital with the disciples Padri and Pendu assisting. Baba himself bathed the lepers and gave them his most tender solicitude as in fact he did with all the patients who poured into Mehrabad from the surrounding villages and towns. During the 2 years that the ashram hospital was in operation, 7,000 outpatients were given free medical care and 500 inpatients. Just as the hospital extended treatment to the sick and needy without charge, the Hazrat Babajan School, with Vishnu Deonkar as a superintendent, provided free boarding, clothing, and tuition to its 200 boys. At first, the untouchables were segregated, but after a few months, age-old prejudices were subtly broken down, and Baba ordered all castes to intermingle. He took upon himself the task of washing the 30 untouchable boys, a symbolic ritual which he performed as part of his daily routine during the life of the school. It was a strenuous process which required nearly 4 hours, so unspeakably dirty were the boys. On one occasion, among the hundreds of devotees who came to Baba for darshan, the paying of homage, some Brahmin visitors came for master's blessing. As they bowed before him, Baba pointed out that he was bathing untouchables, and to earn his blessings, the visitors would have to take hand in the washing the boys. Even to be touched by the shadow of the untouchable is anathema to a Brahmin. Now, however, their hunger for Baba's blessing proved more compelling than the pull of ancient caste taboo. To see this Brahmin pilgrim bathing the bodies of untouchable students with their sacrosanct hands was a sight unprecedented in India. Only perfect master could make them do it and like it. Dispelling ignorance and prejudice. The condition of depressed classes of India is truly deplorable. Baba says this is one of the basic spiritual causes of India's inferior status in the community of nations. Two, to emphasize the need for removing this blight, Baba persistently works to dissolve the prejudices of the Brahmins who are responsible for this condition and to dispel the dispirited ignorance of the untouchables, which over the centuries has become inbred. Though all classes in the villages bordering on the ashram received Baba's spiritual and material help, it was to the untouchable that he directed most of his compassionate activity. Food and clothing were supplied to those who needed them most. If they were being squeezed by overseers for non-payment or back debts on plots of land, Baba came to their rescue. Those who showed signs of more than average ability were provided with the necessary funds to further their education or training in Bombay, and arrangements were made for their lodging with his devotees there. If quarrels of any kind arose among them or with the upper classes, Baba acted as a fair and wise arbiter. So extreme is the economic plight of the Mahars, as the untouchables are called, that they are in chronic state of semi-starvation. Those among them who regarded Baba as both friend and spiritual master, so constantly exhorted by him to give up their habit of eating the flesh of dead or injured animals. Once, after having spoken to them repeatedly about the harm of such practices, he caught them in the act of secreting in their quarters the carcass of a goat. He persuaded them to throw it away and take oath never again to indulge in the filthy practice. Then he took them to Merabad, where he uh, fed them bon- yeah, bountifully on healthful vegetarian food. Their pledge was not, however, long honored. Shortly afterward, Baba heard from some of the Mahar boys in the school that they were having meat at home, as well as fish and eggs. Knowing the relation of food to consciousness and seeking by every means to raise the life tone of the Mahars, Baba and instructed both the boys and their parents never to indulge in food which injected gross animal vibration into the body. His reason for this was that these untouchables, whose bodies needed drastic purification, needed also the character discipline of self-denial. So again, Baba reprimanded the boys, and by way of emphasis, he forbade them to eat any of the tasty, nourishing meals supplied at the school. This measure brought its desired result. Post haste, post haste, the parents and guardians of the boys appeared before Baba and craved his pardon. When some time later word was brought to Baba that a few of the Arangaon Mahars had found dead bullock and feasted upon it, he went to the village, hold court over the guilty persons. None of the Mahars who had given their recent pledge were implicated, but Baba's stern, fatherly warning made the guilty one uneasy. So they too promised to bury all dead animals in the future instead of eating them. Baba realized, of course, that their decision was influenced by his offer to compensate them in a coin for every animal, corpse buried, and a skin delivered to him. To teach the upper caste some additional needed lessons, Baba invariably ate outside with the untouchables when invited to break bread with the Aranga villagers, though special provision was always made for him inside with the Brahmins. By such example and many others, too numerous to relate, Baba exerted upon the neighboring villages an influence so profound that over the years it completely changed their consciousness and their lives. During this Mirabad period, in contrast to the Bombay ashram, where visitors were strictly forbidden, hordes of devotees and the callers paid their respects to Baba. Among the pilgrims, there were a fair number of genuine spiritual aspirants, but the majority, when put to the test, were rather lukewarm in their zeal. One such was a yogi who insisted that he had come to Baba desiring divine guidance. He stayed for 10 days following Baba's instructions, then suddenly he announced his unwillingness to remain longer. On being questioned, the man declared that the food was not to his liking, to which Baba cynically remarked to his disciples, "Come for God, gone for bread." Motion picture therapy. On special occasions, such as the celebration of the birthday of Hazrat Babajan or Upasni Maharaj, disciples and visitors were treated to motion picture performances, the subject of which were usually the lives of renowned Indian saints Baba's interest in the motion picture as a potent means of quickening mass consciousness has always been very keen and continues to this day. In fact, much of his activity during his visit to the West was focused on contacting writers, directors, and producers of films. According to Baba, in the coming new day, the motion picture will be one of the most effective means arousing in people the higher emotions through the portrayal of soul stirring dramas. Some material for these new age films of tomorrow Baba has already had prepared by those whom he has chosen to take leading part in his phase of this work of his work. Both Eastern and Western disciples have witnessed many a movie with Baba. Once in New York, we went to two shows in one evening. Baba's interest in motion picture performances, however, is not as an avenue of escape. He uses motion picture audiences as as he uses any large gathering of people for his inner work. When the active conscious mind of an audience is stilled by emotional concentration on the picture, Baba is then able to work directly upon the deeper levels of the collective unconscious with greater economy of effort. Consequently, at a dull picture, he would remain longer, often until the very end, for this emotional interest to be aroused. Many times, however, he would cater to the disciples' enjoyment of a good performance and use their absorption in the picture for his own purpose of steering the forces in the unconscious. Silence begins. Early in June 1925, Baba announced that he would soon begin a period of silence. He gathered together the disciples and other members of the community and outlined for each one of his or her respective duties during the silence, which he said will probably continue for at least a year. Then, on July 9th, he summoned the parents and guardians of school boys and asked for their cooperation in permitting their children to remain at school. He explained that his silence was being undertaken for spiritual reasons, not to develop spiritual power in himself, since he already had such powers, but to further his universal work, of which the impending wars and disaster will be necessary purgative phase to be followed by an era of peace and tranquility for mankind. The next morning, Baba left his hut at 5 o'clock and greeted everybody by means of signs and gestures, inquiring as to each individual's well being. And during the day, he was busy as usual, supervising the affairs of the school and community. Thus began his period of silence, which was continued without lapse to the present day. Simultaneously, he began to abstain from touching money, a practice which he also continued to observe. Concerning his tremendous self imposed discipline of total silence, an amusing incident happened while Baba was in Hollywood on his first visit to California. A clever younger reporter was interviewing him for the Los Angeles Times. Suddenly, he sprang the question, "Just how do you pronounce your name?" Baba's eyes twinkled, and he motioned one of his disciples who stood by to answer the man's question. The reporter flushed, and a few minutes later, apologetically admitted that he had come to the interview with the determination of catching Baba off guard and exposing him as a fraud who had adopted silence as a novel publicity stunt. The next day, May 13, 1932, the interview appeared in the paper that with none of the flippancy which characterized some of the newspaper's reports, but written with dignity and restraint. During the first year
Wow.
of his silence,
Cheeky journalist.
yeah, during the first year of his silence, Baba spent many hours daily writing the account of his experience during the period. When he was completely in the superconscious state, often he would write all night while the colony was sleeping, and sometimes this work would produce in him extreme exhaustion or fever. Yet, he continued it as a necessary part of his preliminary life work. So far, no one has seen this manuscript, which Baba says contains hitherto unknown spiritual secrets. When in his wisdom the time is expedient for its publication, he will release it. A few months after the inception of his silence, Baba began again to observe frequent fasts, which varied in duration from days to months and in kind from partial fasting, consisting of one scant meal a day, to complete abstinence from food and liquids. The prolonged fast, according to Baba, were for the purpose of effecting the removal of these binding karmic impressions which his disciples had acquired through yogic practices in former lives. Symbolic
Jai
Jai
Baba.
Baba. Jai Baba.
I just wanted to say, is this the mysterious script which
Yeah,
which
the
has been
book.
referred? Yeah. So anybody that has researched, I know Karthik, you have a curious mind. So any ideas where we can retrieve it, find it?
I have a curious mind. Okay, thank you. But yes, I don't have any clue. I am as clueless as you are, and probably as curious as you as well. But we'll find out. I think
Yes.
in time it'll come out.
Yes.
So on that note, actually, Ashish, why don't we rotate the reading again? Ashok ji or Sanjay, whoever wants to read. Are you in a position to read, Ashok?
Yeah. Okay. For some time.
Yeah, it's almost 10, 20 minutes. That's it. Yeah.
A few months after. Sorry.
Yeah. Symbolic activity, please. Jai Baba.
Symbolic activity. Throughout the fast, Baba continued his life of never ceasing activity. In fact, he now seemed to increase his physical labors. In addition to the arduous task of daily washing the Mahar boys 3 or 4 times a week, he now made all the boys in the school with his own hands. When the number exceeded 40, he permitted the Mandali circle of disciples to give him a helping hand. But he continued to assume the chief burden of the work himself. At this time also, he made a point of washing the dirty clothes of 5 of the school boys. As later in Baba's work with the spiritually dazed men, his washing of the boys and their clothes was, in words of the angelical catechism, an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. A ritual whereby Baba was achieving for the boys a cleansing of consciousness which would ultimately release them from all egocentric limitations. Another sacramental act was Baba's daily grinding of grain to supply the flour to the community. While he exacted of his disciples the most physical activity, he never spared them, he never spared himself in any way. Once, when a mechanical well lifter was being installed, Baba instructed the disciples and mason to finish it that night. When he found that they were working too slowly, he joined hands with them and completed the job in the stipulated time. All outer action has spiritual significance for Baba. When therefore he speeds up any physical activity, he is accelerating a corresponding activity on the spiritual plane. In the sudden breakup of the Mehrabad activities in 1926 and the razing to the ground of most of the buildings, may be found another example of Baba's symbolic way of working, concerning which Baba once said, When one has to erect a large building, a temporary scaffolding is erected. When the building is completed, the scaffolding is removed. The school, the hospital, and other buildings were but scaffoldings for my real work, inner work. Now that is finished, the scaffolding has to go. Though a sudden upheaval uprooted many people, none were cast adrift. Due to Baba's foresight, provision was made for all those who might have been rendered homeless or destitute by the change. New scaffolding erected. In the early spring of 1927, Baba and his disciples were again at Mehrabad, and a new phase of work was begun with the opening of another school in a bungalow on the outskirts of the village, with Chanji as principal. Coincident with his move, Baba ceased writing his communication and henceforth began using the small alphabet board, which has since become so familiar to thousands of his followers in the East and West. One might naturally suppose that Baba's silence and the use of alphabet board in lieu of speaking would constitute a barrier between himself and others. Actually, the direct opposite is true. Most of us have discovered that it is our moments of silent communion with the loved one which unite us most truly and deeply. Even more true is this with Baba. If one is attuned to him, deeper levels of consciousness in which no words are needed to convey meaning are quickened to their highest potential. To sit silently with a soul whose mind is wholly one with God, whose heart beats in constant rhythm with the love songs of the universe, is an experience which far transcends the interchange of the spoken word. The duties of the disciples during the second Mehrabad period were varied and arduous. Not only did they minister to the destitute and the sick, including lepers, but they shared in their privations, following the rules instituted by Baba. New scaffoldings. This is heading, is it? Sorry. Can you take it up, Karthik? Can you
No, that's
take it
just
up?
the continuation. It's the,
Oh,
I mean,
okay, sorry,
repetition,
sorry.
repetition of the title. Yeah, you can continue directly with the word. Yeah.
No, no, no. Yeah, no, it's okay. Which reduced the standards for food and living to the level of those whom they served. Thus, they were able fully to appreciate the needs and viewpoint of afflicted humanity. The work was systematically organized by Baba and included such roles as nurse, watchman, cook, manager, storekeeper, accountant, teacher, reporter, writer, singer, water carrier, barber, washerman. It should be manager.
Yeah, yeah.
General duties in which all the mandali shared included the spreading of the grounds with cow dung, feeding the hospital patients with hot water, the heating of which under the primitive conditions of Mehrabad was in itself a full-size cure, washing the hospitals and dispensary floors, and much other mental work.
Menial
Fools
work.
for God, a menial work, yeah. Fools for God. Another discipline which Baba exacted of his men at times was that of begging for food when they went on short journeys. Once, the quiet villagers of Valki were astonished to see so many mendicants in decent coats, pants, shoes, none of which beggars in India ever wear, begging for food. They were abused, taunted, and laughed at. But persevering, they finally returned to Baba with sundry bits of food, which he mixed with one concoction and distributed amongst the disciples. Soon the identity of the beggars and Baba's presence with them was discovered, to the great consternation of those who had refused food to the mendicants. For a devout to refuse food to a perfect master of all his disciples is the same as refusing to serve God. Life at Mehrabad with Baba was not a soft one for the disciples, nor was it intended to be. Baba was training his circle to participate in the greatest spiritual quickening the human race has ever experienced. For his work, he once told us he must have men and women who are strong and stable as mountains. He requires souls who will go through fire, if necessary, without flinching or faltering. Another master said once of Baba that he was putting his disciples through a disciplined regime such as never before has been known in man's history. Yet through it all, down the long, strenuous years of preparation for the work which is yet to begin, they have not wavered. Only in a few instances have close ones deserted him, and in these cases, it has been less the strict Spartan life to which they were subjected that caused their deflection than the conflict they experienced in trying to find rational explanations for Baba's super rational, incomprehensible ways. Perhaps they had not read or understood those words of Saint Augustine. A comprehended God is no God. I'd like to read this again. Perhaps they had not read or understood those words of Saint Augustine. A comprehended God is no God.
Comprehended God is no God.
Beautiful
Yes,
expression.
yes. You can highlight this.
Yeah,
Mamaji, would you like to read? I mean, we've not heard your voice. Would you want to read, Mamaji?
Yes, yes. I will
You can
continue
continue.
for some time. Okay.
You can continue from there. And
Okay.
thanks for highlighting, Karthik. And I just wanted to add that comprehend God is no God. So we cannot understand the significance, the spiritual significance of all the things which He has done. Is what I, revisited today. Over to you, Mamaji.
Uh, Once to a Western woman disciple who was going through a period of rationalistic doubt and questioning, Baba said, "Don't try to understand me. My depth is unfathomable. Just love me." For those of us who have been privileged to be close to Baba, this is not a difficult order to obey. Though we have all, I suspect, been through the value veil of puzzled wonder, we have come out of it loving him the more because, in some measure, we have been permitted to glimpse the little more of his divine magnitude. An outstanding disciple. The story of Leader, one of Baba's Indian disciples, illustrates the attitude of one who goes on the way with the Master in spite of severe tests and reveals another illuminated soul's estimate of Baba. Before becoming Baba's disciple, Leader heard him discoursing one day on spiritual liberation. At the close of the talk, he asked Baba if he could give him the liberation about which he had spoken. Baba replied by asking him if he would be willing to do exactly as he instructed. Pleader said that he would. Baba then assured him that if he carried out his orders, he would give him the liberation which he sought. After a short stay in the ashramata Mehrabad, Baba ordered him locked in a small room in Bombay, which Baba himself spiritually prepared by occupying it for a few hours. Pleader was then instructed to eat or drink nothing but milk, but to observe complete silence, to see no one except the man who would attend his daily requirements, to read nothing nor to write. The locality of his lodging was changed every year or so, but he saw no one save the disciples who attended to his needs and Baba, who came once a year.
wow.
At the expiration of 5 years of this discipline, Baba sent him to Rishikesh to contact one of his agents, a sixth plane saint, well known in that section.
On finding the saint, pleader showed him Baba's picture by way of spiritual introduction, whereupon the saint immediately took him into his cave, much to the consternation of the disciples, who had never been permitted to set foot inside their master's abode. Then the saint proceeded to ridicule pleader's silence and his milk diet. How can you help humanity, he questioned, if you do not speak? And just how do you expect to get milk in this rugged section of the world? To this, pleader replied with his board that in observing silence and partaking only of milk, he was obeying his master's orders. The saint then asked if he had any great spiritual experience at the hands of his master, to which pleader replied that he had not. But now the saint's attitude changed. He smiled and declared, "Ah, but your master has perfectly prepared the ground. At a touch from him, you will become perfect even as he is. You do well to serve faithfully such a master. You can have no idea of the infinite scope of his activity. Even I, with my spiritual knowledge, can fathom only a fraction of his depth." Shortly after his return to Meherabad, pleader was permitted to enter again into normal life of the ashram. While in India, I had the opportunity of talking with him. He was at that time in charge of God intoxicated men in Baba's Rahuri retreat. I asked him if he had not found those years of such severe discipline very difficult. He replied with a depth of tranquility which would only arise from a mind at peace with itself and the world. I could never have done it without Baba's grace. How the master works. The saint's question to pleader concerning his spiritual experiences while undergoing the rigors of fasting, silence, and seclusion is one which many people ask the followers of Baba. It is somehow thought that a master parcels out states of higher consciousness or psychic powers, much as an indulgent father might give sweets to a favorite child. But such is not the case. A master such as Baba trains his disciples for universal work, not for their personal enjoyment. His first objective, therefore, is to free them from the bondage of the ego which they have acquired in their present and former lives, so that they may be unobstructed channels for his work. In order that he may avoid the pitfalls of the psychic and higher mental states, the master takes the disciple through the cosmic planes blindfolded, his purpose being to liberate him from all lesser phases of consciousness than the ultimate and supreme one, that of becoming aware of his union with God. To accomplish this, the roots of the ego must be destroyed and prevented from forming new tentacles, such as psychic experiences and powers inevitably generate. Once he is permanently free from the snares of the ego, then all power may be entrusted to the disciple. Until then, the dark night of which the Christian mystics speak is the safest and quickest route to the mountain top of God consciousness.
The dark night of the soul.
Yes. Much of the criticism which has been leveled against Baba is on the grounds that he does not conform to the accepted standards of how people think a master should function. particularly in India, where there is so much tradition about saints and masters. Many find it difficult to fit Baba into the usual category of the holy man who spends most of his time wrapped in meditation and unconscious samadhi. A master who plays games skillfully, supervises the building of a house or the choreography of a dance, is to them a fantastic figure. They expect his mastery to exercise itself only in the realms of mystical experience. Only if he sits for days lost in trance are they likely to be convinced that he is a God man. They do not understand that the supreme achievement of consciousness is to maintain the ecstasy of the trance condition in the midst of all mundane affairs. They do not understand that the supreme achievement of consciousness is to maintain the ecstasy of the trance condition in the midst of all mundane affairs. Perhaps it is because our own human nature is still so unredeemed that some of us deny a God who dares to be human, yet logically a perfect one, whose work is the redemption of mankind, must be perfect in his humanity. He should function with all the powers of human being raised to the nth degree. Whatever the human mind may conceive as comprising the fulfilled personality, he should have. The inner beauty which expresses itself as grace, charm, and compassion, that inner poise which gives detachment and a sense of humor, that inner joy which expresses itself in work and in play. He should be human as well as godlike, and he should at all times express the ecstasy and peace of God. Otherwise, the word made of flesh is a contradiction in terms. God is to be God, the incarnate avatar, should be master of all masters and masteries. Such a master Baba is. His purpose for his disciples is to train them that they too shall make the whole of life an unbroken meditation, such as Kabir describes. He is the real Sadguru who can reveal the form of the formless to the vision of these eyes. He is the real Sadguru who can reveal the form of the formless to the vision of these eyes, who teaches the simple way of attaining to him that is other than rites and ceremonies, who teaches the simple way of attaining to him that is other than rites and ceremonies, who does not make you close the doors and hold the breath and renounce the world, who does not make you close the doors, hold the breath, and renounce the world, who makes you perceive the Supreme Spirit wherever the mind attaches itself, who teaches you to be still in the midst of all your activities, ever immersed in bliss, having no fear in this mind. He keeps the spirit of union in the midst of all enjoyments. The infinite dwelling of the infinite being is everywhere, in earth, water, sky, and air. Firm as the thunderbolt, the seat of the seeker is established above the void. Firm as the thunderbolt, the seat of the seeker is established above the void. He is he who is within is without. I see him and none else. He who is within is without. I see him and none else. very, very powerful way of expression. One of Baba's Western devotees once asked him why he held such a high transcendent goal before people and suggested that some of the lesser steps along the way seemed more possible of attainment for the average person. To which Baba replied that there is only one goal, union with God. It is that which all life is consciously or unconsciously seeking. Anything else is merely illusion. Point blank. More possible to attain for the average person. To which Baba replied that there is only one goal, union with God. It is that which all life is consciously or unconsciously seeking. Anything else is merely illusion. To aid those who have arrived at the place of consciously seeking this goal, Baba uses the simple ordinary events of life. He works with natural laws. He does not supervene them. He helps the aspirant to make the whole of life a spiritual exercise, to live as Saint Paul describes, for me to live is Christ. Or as the Chinese sage replied to one who asked, what is Tao? Usually life is the very Tao.
Wow,
Okay.
very nice. I think we are out of
Karthik, you
time.
can just a suggestion. You can highlight the earlier one that it is that which all life is consciously or unconsciously seeking. Anything else is illusion. Even the line before that. These two
Yes.
lines, if you could highlight, I think they are profound.
Sure, sure. Even this was very good.
Yes, he who is within is without. I see him and none else. Wow.
Right.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
So
Jay Baba.
we'll stop here given that we're out of time.
Yes.
I will stop recording and Star Meher Baba ki jai.